Virgin girl surprisingly got pregnant for billionaire CEO and ran away. What happened next shocked everyone. I need you to leave. Tonight. Take this money and disappear. Don't contact me, don't come back, and definitely don't tell anyone about the baby. The envelope slides across the marble desk like a death sentence wrapped in cash. $500,000 to erase a life that hasn't even begun yet. This is more than generous, considering the circumstances. Considering what circumstances, Damien? That you're the father? That I'm carrying your child? Or that you're too much of a coward to face what we created together? What we created was a mistake. One night of poor judgment that doesn't need to become 18 years of obligation. You're smart, Ruby. Take the money. Start over somewhere else. Forget this happened. Forget? You want me to forget that I gave you everything? That you were my first? My only? And now you're paying me to disappear like I'm some kind of problem you can throw money at. That's exactly what you are. A problem. And this is the solution. Let me tell you about the most shocking story I've ever encountered in my years of chronicling the lives of the wealthy and the desperate. This isn't just about a billionaire and a virgin, though it starts there. This is about what happens when the universe decides to teach two people that some connections can't be severed by distance, money, or even betrayal. Picture this scene. A penthouse office overlooking downtown Chicago, where Damien Sterling, 32 years old and worth $4.7 billion, is trying to buy his way out of the most unexpected situation of his carefully controlled life. Across from him sits Ruby Connolly, 23 years old, librarian at the city's oldest rare book archive, 3 months pregnant, and about to make a decision that will change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. But before you judge either of them, before you think you know where this story goes, let me tell you something. The baby growing inside Ruby wasn't conceived in passion or even affection. It was conceived in the strangest way possible, through a series of events so unlikely that if I hadn't verified every detail myself, I wouldn't believe it either. And the virgin part? Well, that's where this gets really interesting. Because Ruby Connolly was indeed a virgin when she got pregnant with Damien Sterling's baby. How is that possible, you ask? Keep listening. Because what happened next didn't just shock everyone. It redefined what's possible when fate decides to play matchmaker with two people who never should have met, never should have connected, and definitely never should have created life together. 6 months before that confrontation in the penthouse, Ruby Connolly was living a life so ordinary it could have been prescribed for insomnia. She worked at the Whitmore Rare Book Archive, a job that paid barely enough to cover her studio apartment in Rogers Park. Her biggest excitement was discovering a first edition tucked between common prints. Her idea of a wild Friday night was reading Jane Austen with a glass of wine that came from a box. You need to get out more, her coworker Melanie insisted for the 100th time. You're 23, not 83. When's the last time you went on a date? I date. Books don't count as dates, Ruby. I met with actual humans. Name one. Ruby couldn't. Because the truth was, she'd never really dated anyone. A few coffee meetings in college that went nowhere. A kiss at senior prom that felt like pressing her lips against damp cardboard. She'd built her life around the safety of solitude, the reliability of books over boys. I'm not interested in the whole dating scene, Ruby said, returning to cataloging a new acquisition. It's all apps and hookups and people pretending to be something they're not. Not everyone's pretending. Some people are genuinely looking for connection. Those people aren't on dating apps in Chicago. How would you know? You've never tried. She had a point. But Ruby had her reasons for avoiding romantic entanglements. Growing up with a mother who'd had her at 16, who'd struggled and sacrificed and aged before her time, Ruby had learned early that men could leave, but consequences stayed. She'd watched her mother's heart break repeatedly over men who promised everything and delivered nothing. Ruby had decided early on that her heart would remain whole, even if that meant it remained alone. Meanwhile, 30 blocks south in the Sterling Industries Tower, Damien Sterling was living a life that was the opposite of ordinary in every way. His typical day started at 5 a.m. with a workout that cost more than most people's rent, followed by meetings that moved millions, decisions that affected thousands, and a loneliness that no amount of money could cure. You need to settle down, his mother informed him during their monthly obligatory dinner. 32 is getting late for a man in your position. My position is CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I don't think marital status affects my stock prices. I meant your position as my son who hasn't given me grandchildren. Mother, we've discussed this. I don't have time for a family. You don't make time. There's a difference. The result is the same. The result is you dying alone in that penthouse with no one to mourn you but your accountants. My accountants are very loyal. Damien. His mother's voice carried that tone that had made board members cower and competitors crumble. You're going to die alone and unloved if you don't change something. I'm going to die rich and successful. Same thing, darling. Same thing. The conversation haunted him more than he'd admit. Because the truth was, Damien Sterling was lonely. Not the kind of lonely that could be fixed by the parade of models and actresses his publicist arranged for him to be seen with, but the deep, existential loneliness of a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone see inside. The universe has a sense of humor about these things. It takes a virgin who's afraid of love and a billionaire who doesn't believe in it, and it creates a situation so absurd that only real life could write it. It started with a charity auction. The Whitmore Archive was desperate for funding, and someone had the brilliant idea to auction off an evening with Chicago's hidden treasures, where donors could get private tours of the archive's most valuable pieces. Ruby had been volunteered to be one of the guides. I don't want to do this, she protested to her boss, Mr. Hendricks. It's one evening. These donors keep us operational. Smile, show them some books, collect the check. What if they expect more than a tour? Then you show them the exit. But Ruby, these are respectable people. Wealthy, but respectable. In my experience, those two things are mutually exclusive. Your extensive experience with wealthy people. I've read The Great Gatsby. Fiction doesn't count as experience. It does when it's accurate. The night of the auction, Ruby wore her only cocktail dress, a black thing she'd bought for her college graduation and hadn't worn since. It was modest to the point of being severe, which was exactly what she wanted. The less attention she attracted, the better. But the universe had other plans. Ladies and gentlemen, our next auction item is a private evening tour with our youngest and most knowledgeable archivist, Ms. Ruby Connolly. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the hotel ballroom. She specializes in medieval manuscripts and has a particular expertise in illuminated texts. Bidding starts at $5,000. Ruby stood at the side of the stage, wanting to disappear. The lights were too bright, the room too full of people who looked at her like she was another item to be purchased. 5,000, someone called out. 10,000, another voice countered. 20,000. This voice was different, deeper, more controlled, coming from the back of the room where the lights didn't quite reach. Ruby squinted, trying to see who was bidding such an insane amount for a tour of old books. 50,000. The first bidder responded, clearly annoyed at being challenged. 100,000. The deep voice again, casual as ordering coffee. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the back corner where Damien Sterling stood, looking bored by his own generosity. 100,000 going once, twice, sold to Mr. Sterling. Ruby's heart sank. She knew who Damien Sterling was. Everyone in Chicago knew. Tech billionaire, corporate raider, the man who'd built an empire on the bones of companies he'd destroyed and rebuilt. The last person she wanted to spend an evening with. Congratulations, Melanie whispered. You just got bought by Chicago's most eligible bachelor. I didn't get bought. The tour got bought. Same thing, honey. Same thing. The tour was scheduled for the following Friday night. Ruby spent the week dreading it, imagining all the ways an entitled billionaire could make her evening miserable. She prepared the most boring tour possible, focusing on agricultural records from the 1800s and mathematical treatises that could cure insomnia. But when Damien Sterling walked into the archive that Friday night, he wasn't what she expected. Miss Connolly? I'm Damien. Thank you for doing this. He was tall, yes, and handsome in that angular way that suggested good genetics and better nutrition. But there was something else, a tiredness around his eyes that makeup couldn't hide, a weight to his shoulders that custom tailoring couldn't disguise. Mr. Sterling, welcome to the Whitmore Archive. Please, call me Damien. Mr. Sterling was my father, and he was an ass. Okay. Damien, what would you like to see? Whatever you're passionate about. I didn't pay $100,000 to see what you think I want to see. I paid it to see what matters to you. This threw Ruby off script. She'd prepared for arrogance, not interest. Well, There's a collection of Byzantine prayer books that just came in. They're not valuable in the traditional sense, but the marginalia is fascinating. You can see where monks got bored and started doodling. Monks doodled constantly. Little knights fighting snails, rabbits playing musical instruments. Turns out boredom is universal across centuries. Show me. For the next 3 hours, Ruby forgot she was giving a tour to a billionaire. She showed him her favorite pieces, the books that made her heart race, the manuscripts that reminded her why she loved her job despite the terrible pay. And Damien listened, really listened, asked questions that showed he was paying attention, made connections she hadn't expected. This reminds me of coding, he said, looking at an illuminated mathematical proof. The elegance of logic, the beauty of solution. You code. I used to, before I became too important to do actual work. Now I just tell other people to code. Do you miss it? Every day? It's like, imagine if you could only read about books but never touch them. That sounds like hell. It's close. They ended up in the archive's oldest section, surrounded by books that predated America itself. The air smelled of leather and age and possibility. Can I ask you something? Damien said suddenly. You paid $100,000. I think you've earned a question. Why do you hide? Excuse me. You're brilliant. You're passionate. You're beautiful. But you dress like you're trying to disappear. You work in a job that keeps you hidden. And according to the background check my security team ran, you have no social media, no dating history, no presence in the world beyond these walls. You ran a background check on me? I run background checks on everyone. But yours was unusually empty. Like you're trying not to exist. Maybe I like my privacy. Maybe you're afraid. Of what? The same thing I am. Connection. Vulnerability. The possibility that letting someone in means risking getting hurt. The air between them shifted. This wasn't employer and employee, donor and guide. This was two lonely people recognizing something in each other. I should go, Damien said suddenly, stepping back. Thank you for the tour. That's it. What else would there be? I don't know. You just seemed, we seemed what? Like we were connecting? I don't connect, Miss Connolly. I acquire, I achieve, I accomplish. I don't connect. He left before she could respond, leaving Ruby standing among ancient books feeling like something important had just slipped away. But the universe wasn't done with them. 3 weeks later, Ruby woke up feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, but off. Like her body was playing a song in a different key. She ignored it, attributing it to stress from the archive's funding crisis getting worse. We might have to close, Mr. Hendricks announced at the staff meeting. The sterling donation helped, but we need sustainable funding. We're exploring all options, including selling some of the collection. You can't sell the books, Ruby protested. They're not just objects, they're history. History doesn't pay rent, Ruby. There has to be another way. Unless you know any more billionaires willing to drop $100,000 on tours, we're out of options. She thought about calling Damien. She had his card, elegant black with silver lettering. But what would she say? Hi, remember me? The weird girl who showed you monk doodles? Want to save my job. The sickness got worse. Not dramatically, just persistently. Nausea in the mornings, exhaustion by afternoon, a strange metallic taste that wouldn't go away. You look terrible, Melanie said one morning, finding Ruby hunched over a trash can in the staff room. Thanks. Very helpful. When's the last time you saw a doctor? I don't have time to be sick. That's not how illness works. It is if I ignore it hard enough. But ignoring it became impossible when she fainted in the medieval section, crashing into a display of illuminated psalters. Mr. Hendricks insisted she go to the emergency room, threatening to fire her if she didn't. It's probably just stress, Ruby told the ER doctor. Or maybe food poisoning. We'll run some tests to be sure. When was your last period? I don't, maybe 6 weeks ago? It's irregular when I'm stressed. Any chance you could be pregnant? Ruby actually laughed. No, definitely not. You're sexually active? I'm sexually non-existent. I haven't, no? There's no chance. The doctor looked skeptical but ran the tests anyway. An hour later, she came back with an expression that made Ruby's stomach drop. Miss Connolly, this is going to sound strange, but you're pregnant. That's impossible. The blood test is definitive. You're about 6 weeks pregnant. But I've never had sex. I've never even been close to having sex. This is a mistake. Have you had any procedures recently? IVF? Artificial insemination? No, nothing. I haven't even been to a gynecologist in 2 years. Any blackouts? Periods of time you can't remember? No. Doctor, this is impossible. I'm telling you, I'm a virgin. I've never been with anyone. The doctor ordered more tests, including a DNA test that would later become crucial. But for the moment, Ruby sat in a hospital bed, staring at proof of something that couldn't be true. She was pregnant. She was a virgin. And somehow, both things were simultaneously true. Comment below if you've ever had your entire understanding of reality shattered in a single moment. Because that's exactly what Ruby Connolly was experiencing, and it was about to get so much stranger. The explanation, when it came, was both mundane and miraculous. A mix-up at a fertility clinic where Ruby had donated eggs 2 years prior to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. A billionaire's sample meant for a surrogate. A technician's moment of carelessness that created life where none should have existed. There was a breach in protocol, the clinic director explained, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Your eggs were fertilized and implanted instead of being stored. The surrogate who was supposed to receive the embryo received a different one. We've only just discovered the error during a routine audit. You're telling me I'm pregnant with a stranger's baby? Without ever having sex? Without my consent? The legal ramifications are complex. But essentially, yes. Who's the father? I can't disclose that without. Who is the father? Mr. Damian Sterling. He'd contracted a surrogate to carry his child. Your embryo was implanted by mistake. The room spun. Ruby gripped the desk to keep from falling. The billionaire? The one who bid on me at the auction. I'm not aware of any auction. But yes, Damian Sterling of Sterling Industries. I need to sit down. You are sitting. Then I need to lie down. This is where the story gets complicated. Because Ruby had 3 choices. She could terminate the pregnancy, essentially erasing the mistake. She could have the baby and give it to Damian, its biological father who'd wanted a child enough to hire a surrogate. Or she could keep it, raise a billionaire's baby as a single mother on a librarian's salary. But first, she had to tell him. The meeting was arranged through lawyers, because of course it was. Ruby sat in a conference room that cost more to decorate than she made in a year, waiting for the man whose child she carried without either of them choosing it. When Damian walked in, he looked like he'd aged 5 years in the 3 weeks since the auction. Ms. Connolly. His voice was ice. I'm told you're carrying my child. Not by choice. So you say? Excuse me. This is quite convenient, isn't it? You meet me, find out I'm wealthy, and suddenly you're pregnant with my child through an impossible clinic error? You think I did this on purpose? How? How would I even accomplish that? Money motivates people to accomplish impossible things. I didn't want your money at the auction, and I don't want it now. Everyone wants money. I want my life back. I want to not be pregnant with a stranger's baby. I want to wake up and have this be a nightmare. Something in her voice must have reached him because his expression softened slightly. The clinic has admitted fault, his lawyer said. The documentation is clear. This was a medical error, not fraud. Fine. Then we handle it quietly. How much to make this go away? I'm not a problem you can pay off, Ruby said. Everything's a problem that can be paid off. Name your price. There is no price. This is a life we're talking about. It's a mistake we're talking about. One that can be corrected. You want me to terminate? I want this situation resolved. And if I don't want to terminate, then we have a problem. We already have a problem. I'm pregnant with your child, and neither of us chose it. Damian stood, pacing to the window. The Chicago skyline stretched out below, a kingdom of glass and steel he commanded. But he couldn't command this. What do I? You want, Ms. Connolly? I want time. To think. To decide. To process the fact that I'm apparently the Virgin Mary of medical malpractice. How much time? A week. 3 days. This isn't a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation. Fine. Then I want something else too. Of course you do. Save the archive. The Whitmore archive where I work. It's going under. You wanted to know my price? That's it. Save the archive, and I'll make a decision in 3 days. That's extortion. That's negotiation. You just said everything's a negotiation. He turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time since walking in. She was pale, obviously exhausted, stress written in every line of her body. But her eyes were fierce, determined. Fine. I'll save your archive, and you'll decide in 3 days. Deal. They shook hands, and Ruby tried to ignore the jolt that went through her at his touch. This was insane. She was carrying his child, had never even kissed him, had barely spoken to him, and yet something about his hand in hers felt like coming home. 3 days passed in a blur of research, soul-searching, and vomiting. Morning sickness had hit with a vengeance, as if her body wanted to remind her constantly of its occupied state. Ruby made lists, pro and con, called her mother, who laughed for 10 minutes straight before saying, "Only you could get pregnant without having sex." Consulted a therapist, a priest, and a fortune teller in a moment of desperation. But in the end, the decision was simple. She couldn't terminate. Not because of religion or politics or even morality, but because this child, conceived in the strangest possible way, felt like fate. Like the universe had decided she and Damien Sterling needed to be connected, and had found the most ridiculous way to make it happen. She called his office. "I've made my decision. And I'm keeping it. The baby. I'm keeping the baby." Silence. Then, "I see. And what do you expect from me?" "Nothing. This was an accident. You didn't choose this any more than I did. I'll raise it alone. It's my child. Biologically. That matters. Does it? You were going to have a surrogate carry it. You would have been fine with someone else giving birth to your child. Someone I chose. Someone I vetted. Not you. Gee, thanks. I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. I'm not the kind of woman Damien Sterling would choose to have his child." "I get it. That's not. We need to meet. In person. Not with lawyers." "Why?" "Because we're going to be connected for the rest of our lives through this child. We should at least try to be civil." Civil. Ruby could do civil. What she couldn't do was explain why her heart raced at the thought of seeing him again. They met at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant where Damien had reserved a private room. He looked tired but less hostile than at the lawyer's office. "You're keeping it," he said without preamble. "I am. What do you want from me? Money? Support? Marriage?" Ruby choked on her water. "Marriage? We don't even know each other. People have married for less. People are idiots." "True. So what do you want?" "I told you. Nothing. This is my choice. I'll handle it." "You'll handle raising my heir on a librarian's salary?" "It's not your heir. It's a baby. And yes, I'll manage." "What about medical care? Education? College? I'll figure it out." "You're being stubborn. You're being controlling. I'm being practical. This child deserves every advantage. This child deserves love. That's the only advantage that matters." Spoken like someone who's never been poor. "I am poor. By your standards, anyway." "No. You're middle class playing at being noble. There's a difference. And you're rich playing at being generous. Offering money to assuage your guilt. I don't feel guilty. You should. Your sperm invaded my egg without permission. That's not how biology works." That's exactly how this biology worked. They stared at each other across the table, two strangers bound by the strangest possible circumstance. "Let me be involved," Damien said suddenly. "This child is mine too. Let me be part of this." "Why? You don't even like me. I don't know you. There's a difference. So get to know me." "How?" "Date me." The words hung between them like a challenge. Damien looked genuinely shocked. "Date you? You're carrying my child. Out of order, I know. But if we're going to co-parent, shouldn't we at least try to like each other?" "I don't date. Neither do I. So we'll be equally bad at it." This is insane. This entire situation is insane. What's one more layer of crazy? He considered this, drumming his fingers on the table in a pattern that suggested complex thought. "Fine. We'll date. But there are rules." "Of course there are. No sex." Ruby laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. "I'm pregnant with your child and still a virgin. I think we've established that sex isn't on the table. No falling in love. With you? No danger there. No telling anyone about the baby until we figure out what we're doing." "Agreed. And no running away when things get complicated. Things are already complicated. They're about to get worse." He wasn't wrong. Dating while pregnant with the child of the man you're dating, without having ever been intimate with him or anyone else, was a special kind of complicated that should have its own category in the DSM. Their first official date was a disaster. Damien took her to a restaurant with a Michelin star and a waiting list longer than a CVS receipt. Ruby threw up twice before the appetizers arrived and once during the main course. "Morning sickness," she explained, returning from her third bathroom trip. "Though it's evening, so the name is misleading." Should we go? And waste food that costs more than my rent? Never. You're green. It'll pass. Talk to me about something. Distract me. What do you want to know? Why did you want a baby? Through a surrogate, I mean. You're young, rich, presumably fertile. Why not do it the traditional way? Because the traditional way requires a wife. And wives require emotional availability I don't possess. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's practical. It's pathological. Says the virgin pregnant with my child. Fair point. They found a rhythm, eventually. Dates that accommodated her increasingly volatile stomach. Conversations that went deeper than either expected. Damien learned that Ruby read Jane Austen when she was happy and Sylvia Plath when she wasn't. Ruby learned that Damien had built his first computer at age 8 and his first company at 16. You're not what I expected, Ruby said one evening, walking along Lake Michigan. She was 4 months pregnant now, just starting to show. What did you expect? Arrogance. Cruelty. The kind of casual disregard for others that comes with extreme wealth. I can be all those things. But you're not. Not with me. You're carrying my child. That changes things. Does it? Or am I just seeing who you really are when you're not performing corporate titan? Nobody sees who I really am. I do. No. You see who you want me to be. Then who are you really? He stopped walking, looking out at the lake. I'm someone who wanted a child, but not a family. Who wanted legacy without love. Who thought I could control everything, including reproduction. And now I'm standing here with a pregnant virgin I've never kissed, wondering how my life got so far off script. Maybe the script was wrong. Maybe. They stood there, close but not touching, two people caught in an impossible situation that somehow felt more possible every day. I should kiss you, Damien said suddenly. What? We're dating. We're having a baby. I should have kissed you by now. That's not how it works. How does it work then? You kiss someone because you want to, not because you should. I want to. Since when? Since you threw up on my shoes at that restaurant and apologized by quoting Jane Austen. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm slow to process emotions. Damien, can I kiss you, Ruby? She should have said no. This was complicated enough without adding physical intimacy. But standing there, with his child growing inside her and his eyes looking at her like she was something precious, she couldn't remember why keeping distance mattered. Yes, the kiss was awkward at first. Two people who didn't know how to be vulnerable, trying to be vulnerable together. But then something shifted. Damien's hand came up to cup her face. Ruby leaned into him. And suddenly, it wasn't awkward at all. It was perfect. It was terrifying. It was everything a first kiss should be, even if it came after pregnancy instead of before. That was... Ruby started. Unexpected. I was going to say nice. Nice? I kiss you for the first time, and you call it nice? Very nice. You're terrible at this. I told you I was. Virgin, remember? How could I forget? You're the virgin carrying my child. It's like a bad joke or a Greek myth. Which god did we piss off to end up here? All of them, probably. They kept dating. Kept kissing. Kept pretending this was normal, while Ruby's belly grew and the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. The archive was saved by Damien's generous donation, Mr. Hendricks none the wiser about the connection. Ruby kept working, cataloging books while creating life, finding poetry in the parallel acts of preservation. At 6 months, they found out it was a girl. A daughter, Damien said, staring at the ultrasound. I'm having a daughter. We're having a daughter. Right? You okay? You look like you're going to faint. I don't faint. Everyone faints. It's a human thing. I'm barely human. You're becoming more human every day. Is that good? That's wonderful. He held her hand during the ultrasound, and Ruby tried not to read too much into how right it felt. They'd agreed not to fall in love. But agreements, she was learning, meant nothing to hearts. The scandal broke at 7 months. Someone at the fertility clinic leaked the story, and suddenly Ruby's face was everywhere. Virgin birth in Chicago. Billionaire's baby mama never had sex. Modern medical miracle or elaborate hoax. I need you to move in with me, Damien said, arriving at her apartment with a security team. The press is camped outside. It's not safe. I can handle reporters. Can you handle death threats? Because that's what's coming next. Every crazy person who thinks you're either the second coming or the devil's work is going to come after you. That's dramatic. That's realistic. Pack. Now. You can't order me around. Ruby, please. You're carrying my daughter. Our daughter. Let me protect you both. She wanted to argue, but the crowd outside was growing, and someone had already thrown a rock through her window with a Bible verse attached. So she packed, following Damien to his penthouse, entering a world she'd only seen in magazines. This is temporary, she insisted, looking around the space that was bigger than her entire apartment building. Of course. I mean it. Once this dies down, I'm going back home. Whatever you want. But she never went back. Not because Damien wouldn't let her, but because somewhere between moving in and giving birth, she fell in love with him. Despite their agreement, despite the insanity of their situation, despite every logical reason not to, she fell completely, irrevocably in love with the father of her child. The labor started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Ruby woke to pain that felt like her body was trying to turn itself inside out. Damien, she gasped, shaking him awake. They'd been sharing a bed for weeks now, though nothing beyond kissing had happened. It's time. Time for what? The baby, you idiot. She's coming. Now? She's not due for 2 weeks. Tell her that. The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions and Damien breaking every traffic law in Chicago. He held her hand while she screamed, whispered encouragements while she cursed his entire genetic line, stayed by her side through 14 hours of labor. I can't do this, Ruby gasped between contractions. I changed my mind. I don't want to have a baby. Too late for that, love. Don't call me love. Why not? Because we agreed not to fall in love. Agreements mean nothing during labor. I can call you whatever I want. Then I can call you whatever I want to. Deal? You bastard, this is your fault. Technically, it's the clinic's fault. Don't be technical while I'm trying to push your giant-headed child out of my virgin body. Not virgin anymore. Still counts. The doctor looked between them, clearly confused by their dynamic, but wisely said nothing. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect and covered in vernacular, both Ruby and Damien cried. She's beautiful, Damien whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. She's ours, Ruby corrected. Ours. I like that word. Even though we did everything backwards. Especially because we did everything backwards. They named her Grace. Because what else do you call a child conceived through medical accident, carried by a virgin, born to 2 people who never meant to meet? She was Grace personified, unearned and unexpected and absolutely perfect. But remember when I said what happened next shocked everyone? We're just getting to that part. Because 3 days after Grace was born, while Ruby was recovering and Damien was learning how to change diapers, a woman walked into the hospital room who would change everything. Hello, Damien. He looked up from where he was cradling Grace, his face going pale. Vivian, surprised to see me? You're supposed to be dead. Disappointed? Ruby looked between them, confused and increasingly alarmed. Who is this? This, Vivian said, smiling like a snake, is his wife. The hospital room fell silent except for the soft breathing of baby Grace, who seemed blissfully unaware that her entire world had just shifted on its axis. Ruby clutched the bedsheets, still weak from childbirth, staring at the woman who'd just claimed to be Damien's wife. The woman who was supposed to be dead. Someone needs to start explaining. Right now. Ruby's voice came out stronger than she felt. Vivian Blackwood Sterling was everything Ruby wasn't. Tall, elegant, with the kind of cheekbones that came from good breeding and better surgery. She moved into the room like she owned it, which, given her claimed marital status, maybe she did. Oh, Damien didn't tell you about me? How unlike him to keep secrets. Vivian's voice dripped honey laced with arsenic. Though I suppose telling your pregnant girlfriend that you have a wife might complicate things. You're dead, Damien repeated, still holding Grace like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. The plane crash. They found your body. They found a body. Burned beyond recognition. Everyone just assumed it was mine. You faked your death? I escaped, darling. There's a difference. Ruby watched this exchange like a tennis match, her postpartum brain trying to process what was happening. Can someone please explain this to the woman who just gave birth to a baby she conceived without having sex with a man who apparently has a zombie wife? Vivian laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. Without having sex? Oh, that's rich. Well, why did he tell you, sweetheart? It's not a lie, Damien said quickly. It was a medical mistake. IVF mix-up. It's been in all the papers. The virgin birth story? I thought that was publicity spin. Vivian studied Ruby with new interest. You're telling me you're actually a virgin who got pregnant with my husband's child through medical incompetence? Ex-husband, Damien corrected. You're dead, remember? Death doesn't actually divorce you, darling. I checked. Legally, we're still married. Let me pause here to tell you something about moments that change everything. Sometimes they come dramatically, with explosions and revelations. Sometimes they come quietly, in the space between heartbeats. But sometimes, like this moment, they come with the slow, horrible realization that everything you thought was true might be a lie. You need to leave, Damien said, his voice low and dangerous. Now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm your wife. That's my child. She's not your child, Ruby said, finding her voice. She's mine. I carried her. I birthed her. My name is on the birth certificate. As the mother, yes. But as Damien's wife, I have certain rights. Rights you forfeited when you faked your death. Did I? Or did I simply take a 3-year vacation from a marriage that was killing me slowly? 3 years, Ruby repeated. You've been gone 3 years? 3 years, for months, and 16 days. But who's counting? Damien carefully placed Grace in the hospital bassinet, then turned to face his not-dead wife. Why now, Vivian? Why come back now? I saw the news. My husband having a baby with another woman. A virgin, no less. It was too intriguing to resist. That's not an answer. Fine. I'm broke. Happy. My escape plan didn't include sustainable financing. I've been living under an assumed name, working jobs that paid cash, staying off the grid. But that gets old, Damien. Especially when you're used to a certain lifestyle. So you came back for money. I came back for what's mine. Half of everything you've built. That's what marriage means, doesn't it? For richer or poorer. You don't get to quote wedding vows after faking your death. Watch me. A nurse entered, took one look at the tension in the room, and immediately backed out. Smart woman. We should discuss this somewhere else, Damien said. Ruby just gave birth. She doesn't need this stress. Ruby, Vivian said, testing the name. How quaint. The Virgin Mother named after a precious stone. It's almost too perfect. Get out, Ruby said quietly. Excuse me. Get out of my room. I don't care who you are or what you want. I just pushed a human being out of my body after carrying her for 9 months. I'm exhausted, I'm in pain, and I'm not dealing with whatever soap opera drama you're bringing. Get out. Vivian looked genuinely surprised. You have spine. I didn't expect that from someone who'd never even had sex. There's a lot you don't know about me. Clearly. Like how you managed to trap my husband with a baby. Nobody trapped anybody. This was an accident. There are no accidents, sweetheart. Only opportunities. Is that what faking your death was? An opportunity? The best one I ever took. Until now. Damien moved between them, protective instinct finally kicking in. Vivian, leave. We'll meet tomorrow. My lawyer's office. We'll sort this out properly. Will we? Or will you try to make me disappear again? I never made you disappear the first time. Didn't you? With your coldness, your obsession with work, your complete inability to love anything that wasn't profitable. I loved you. You loved the idea of me. The perfect wife for the perfect CEO. But when I turned out to be human, with needs and feelings and opinions, you shut me out. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. When would be? During one of your board meetings? That's the only time you ever paid attention. Ruby watched them, these two people with so much history and hurt between them, and felt her heart breaking for reasons she couldn't quite name. The man she'd fallen in love with had been married. Was married. To a woman he'd driven to fake her own death. Both of you get out, Ruby said. I need to rest. And think. And figure out what this means for Grace. Grace. Vivian's eyebrows rose. You named her Grace? Is there a problem with that? That was my mother's name. The room fell silent again. Even baby Grace seemed to hold her breath. I didn't know, Damien said quietly. You never asked. About my mother, my family, my dreams. You never asked about anything that mattered. I'm asking now. Why did you fake your death, Vivian? Really? She looked at him for a long moment, and Ruby saw something crack in her perfect facade. Because I was pregnant. If the room had been silent before, now it was a vacuum. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, nothing existed except those 4 words. What? Damien's voice was barely a whisper. I was pregnant. With your child. And I knew how you'd react. The same way you reacted when I suggested we start a family. with spreadsheets and projections and risk assessments, with everything except joy. You were pregnant with my child, and you didn't tell me? I tried. For weeks, I tried. But you were in Tokyo, then London, then Singapore. Always another deal, another acquisition. When you finally came home, you spent the entire time on conference calls. So you faked your death? I left. The plane crash was a coincidence. I was supposed to be on that flight, but I'd already disappeared. When I heard about it, I realized it was my chance for a clean break. What happened to the baby? Vivian's composure finally cracked completely. I lost it. 3 months after I left. Stress, the doctor said. Or maybe just karma for running away. Ruby felt tears sliding down her face. This woman, this allegedly cruel, gold-digging wife, had lost everything. Her marriage, her identity, her child. Where's the baby? Vivian asked suddenly, looking around the room. In the bassinet, Ruby said softly. She's sleeping. Vivian moved to look at Grace, and her face transformed. All the hardness, the bitter edge, melted away. She's beautiful. She has Damien's eyes. And your nose. Lucky girl. Vivian, Damien started. I'm not here to destroy your little family, Vivian interrupted. Despite what you might think, I'm not a monster. Then what do you want? What I've always wanted. To be free. Officially, legally, permanently free. A divorce. An expensive divorce. I did spend 3 years dead for you, after all. How expensive? $50 million. That's extortion. That's compensation. For the years I spent being Mrs. Sterling, the perfect corporate wife. For the baby I lost. For the death I had to fake to escape a marriage that was suffocating me. Fine. Both women looked at him in surprise. Fine. Vivian repeated. Just like that. Just like that. 50 million for a divorce and your silence about Grace and Ruby. Why would I need to be silent about them? Because the media would have a field day. The virgin birth story is already insane enough. Add a not dead wife to the mix, and Ruby and Grace will never have peace. You're protecting them. I'm protecting my daughter. And Ruby? Damien looked at Ruby then, really looked at her. Exhausted, overwhelmed, still in a hospital gown. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. And Ruby, you love her. It wasn't a question. We agreed not to fall in love, Ruby said quietly. Agreements mean nothing to hearts, Vivian said, with the voice of experience. Trust me, I agreed to love, honor, and obey. Look how that turned out. This is different. Is it? You're having a baby with someone you barely know. At least Damien and I dated for 2 years before marriage. You also faked your death to escape him. Fair point. Comment below if you've ever been in a love triangle where one point of the triangle was supposed to be dead. Because that's where Ruby found herself, and it was about to get even more complicated. The next day, while Damien met with lawyers to negotiate the world's strangest divorce settlement, Ruby sat in the penthouse nursery he'd had designed, feeding Grace and trying to process everything. The virgin who'd never been kissed 6 months ago was now a mother, in love with a married man whose wife had come back from the dead. Your life is insane, she told Grace, who was too busy eating to comment. But I love you anyway. Maybe because of it. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Ruby? It's Vivian. How did you get my number? I have my ways. Can we meet? Without Damien. Why would I meet with you? Because I have information you need. About the man you're in love with. I'm not. Please. I saw how you looked at him. And how he looked at you. You're both terrible at hiding emotions. What kind of information? The kind that will help you decide if he's worth fighting for. Or if you should run like I did. Against her better judgment, Ruby agreed to meet. She left Grace with the baby nurse Damien had hired and met Vivian at a coffee shop downtown. The supposedly dead woman looked different in daylight, less threatening, more tired. You came, Vivian said. You said you had information. I do. But first, tell me about the virgin birth. I need to understand how someone who's never had sex ended up pregnant with my husband's child. So Ruby told her about the egg donation to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. The clinic's mistake. The bizarre coincidence of meeting Damien at the auction before knowing he was the father. That's either the worst luck or the best fate I've ever heard, Vivian said when she finished. I can't tell which anymore. How does it feel, being a mother without ever being a lover? Backwards. Everything feels backwards. Like I'm reading a book starting from the last chapter. Maybe that's better. You know how it ends, so you can decide if the beginning is worth it. What was your beginning with Damien like? Vivian smiled, but it was sad. Perfect. He was intense, focused, brilliant. He pursued me like I was a company he wanted to acquire. Flowers every day, elaborate dates, promises of a future that looked like a fairy tale. What went wrong? He got me. Once the acquisition was complete, he moved on to the next challenge. That's what Damien does. He conquers, then he gets bored. He doesn't seem bored with Grace. A baby is different. She'll keep growing, changing, challenging him. But you? Once he knows everything about you, once you're no longer a mystery to solve, what then? You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to warn you. I loved him, Ruby. Despite everything, I loved him. But loving Damien Sterling is like loving winter. Beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. People change. Do they? Or do they just get better at hiding who they really are? Before Ruby could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. Where are you? Grace is crying and won't stop. I have to go, Ruby said. He's texting you about the baby. That's good. He never texted me about anything that wasn't work-related. Maybe he's different now. Maybe. Or maybe you're just seeing what you want to see. Either way, be careful, Ruby. Damien Sterling destroys the things he loves. Not intentionally, but inevitably. Ruby rushed back to the penthouse to find Damien walking circles around the living room, Grace screaming in his arms, looking more panicked than she'd ever seen him. She won't stop, he said desperately. I've tried everything. Feeding, changing, burping. She just screams. Ruby took Grace, who immediately quieted, nuzzling into her mother's neck. How did you do that? She knows me. My smell, my heartbeat. I'm home to her. I want to be home to her too. You will be. It takes time. I don't have time. Vivian wants the divorce finalized within a month. She's threatening to go public with everything if I delay. Then let her. I can't risk that. Not for Grace. Can you imagine growing up with that story following her? The virgin birth baby whose father's dead wife came back. It would make a hell of a college essay. This isn't funny, Ruby. It's a little funny. If you step back and look at it objectively, our entire situation is absurd. Is that what this is to you? Absurd? No. It's impossible and crazy and probably doomed. But it's also, what? Real. Despite everything. Despite how we started, this feels real. Real is terrifying. Real is all we have. Damien moved closer, careful not to disturb Grace, who was now sleeping against Ruby's chest. I never loved Vivian. Not really. I loved the idea of her, what she represented. The perfect wife for the perfect life I was building. And me? You were never part of the plan. A virgin librarian who judges me for my wealth and calls me out on my bullshit? Who gets pregnant with my child without ever sleeping with me? You're the opposite of the plan. Is that good or bad? It's terrifying. Because I can't control this. Can't strategize or optimize or leverage. I just have to feel, and I'm terrible at feelings. You're getting better. Am I? Because right now I feel like I'm drowning. That's what love feels like sometimes. Like drowning and flying at the same time. Is that what this is? Love. Ruby looked at him. This billionaire who'd been brought to his knees by a screaming infant and a virgin mother. What else would you call it? Temporary insanity. That too. He kissed her then, careful of Grace between them, and Ruby felt that same spark she'd felt the first time. Electric and impossible and absolutely right. We're doing everything backwards, she murmured against his lips. Maybe backwards is our forward. That makes no sense. Nothing about us makes sense. They were interrupted by the doorbell. Damien's housekeeper showed in a man Ruby didn't recognize, tall and severe in an expensive suit that screamed lawyer. Mr. Sterling, we have a problem. Another one? We're at capacity for problems, Harrison. Mrs. Sterling, the legal Mrs. Sterling, is changing the terms. Of course she is. What does she want now? Full custody of Grace. The words landed like bombs in the quiet nursery. Ruby instinctively held Grace tighter. She can't do that. She has no biological connection to Grace. She's claiming that as your legal wife at the time of conception, she has parental rights. It's unprecedented, but she's found a judge willing to hear the case. That's insane. That's leverage. She's betting you'll pay more to make this go away. How much more? 100 million. And a public statement that your marriage failed due to your infidelity. But there was no infidelity. Ruby and I never. The public won't care about the details. They'll see what she wants them to see. A billionaire who cheated on his wife and got another woman pregnant. I'll fight it. Then you'll lose. Maybe not legally, but publicly. The scandal will follow Grace her entire life. Ruby stood, still holding Grace. No. Both men turned to look at her. No. Damien repeated. We're not paying her off. We're not lying about what happened. And we're definitely not giving her any claim to Grace. Ruby, you don't understand how this works. I understand perfectly. She's bullying us because she thinks we'll cave to protect Grace. But protecting Grace means showing her that you stand up to bullies, not pay them off. This could get ugly. It's already ugly. At least if we fight, we're fighting for truth. The truth is complicated. The truth is simple. You were separated when Grace was conceived. Vivian had faked her death. She has no claim to our daughter. Our daughter, Damien repeated softly. Yes, our. Despite how she came to be, she's ours. And we protect what's ours. Harrison looked between them. If you fight this, everything comes out. The IVF mistake, the virgin birth, Vivian's fake death, all of it. Then it comes out. Ruby, Damien started. No. I'm tired of being ashamed of how Grace came to be. She was conceived through medical accident, carried by a virgin, born to parents who fell in love backwards. So what? That's her origin story. It's weird and wonderful and ours. You'd risk her future for principle? I'd risk everything to teach her that truth matters more than perception. Damien stared at her for a long moment, then turned to Harrison. Prepare for court. We're fighting. This is a mistake. Maybe, but it's our mistake to make. Harrison left, shaking his head, probably calculating his billable hours for what was sure to be a lengthy legal battle. You know Vivian won't stop, Damien said once they were alone. When she wants something, she's relentless. Then we be more relentless. We, you, me, and Grace. The family that shouldn't exist, but does. We're not a family. We're just two people who share a child through bizarre circumstances. The words hurt more than Ruby expected. Right? Of course. Ruby, I didn't mean. It's fine. You're right. We're not a family. We're just, whatever this is. She started to leave, but Damien caught her arm. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm scared that if I call us a family, I'll destroy us like I destroyed my marriage. I'm scared that I'm my father, who loved work more than people. I'm scared that Grace will grow up hating me like I hated him. You're not your father. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you're scared. Because you're trying. Your father never tried, did he? No. He just worked and drank and died at his desk. You won't die at your desk. How do you know? Because I won't let you. Because Grace won't let you. Because even if we're not a family in the traditional sense, we're something. And that something is worth fighting for. What if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you'll fail trying instead of failing by not trying at all. That's very philosophical for someone who just gave birth 3 days ago. I've had a lot of time to think between feedings. Grace stirred in Ruby's arms, making the little sounds that preceded crying. She's hungry again. This child is going to eat us out of house and home. Good thing I'm rich. For now, Vivian might take everything. She can't take this. You, Grace, whatever we are. She can't take that. Promise. I promise to try. That's all I can offer. That's enough. For now. But promises, Ruby was learning, were easier made than kept. The legal battle that followed was brutal, played out in courtrooms and headlines, dissected on social media and dinner tables across the country. The virgin birth story became international news. Vivian gave interviews painting herself as the wronged wife. Damien was portrayed as either a villain or a victim, depending on the outlet. And Ruby? Ruby was called everything from a saint to a scammer. They're saying I planned this, she told Damien one evening, scrolling through particularly vicious comments. That I somehow orchestrated getting pregnant with your baby to trap you. Stop reading those. How? They're everywhere. Someone even started a conspiracy theory that I'm not really a virgin, that this whole thing is an elaborate hoax. We know the truth. The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Grace, now 3 months old, gurgled from her bouncer, blissfully unaware of the storm surrounding her existence. She's so innocent, Ruby said. She didn't ask for any of this. No child asks to be born. They just arrive, and we do our best. Are we doing our best? I don't know. I have no reference point for best in this situation. The court date arrived with the inevitability of a storm that had been building for months. Ruby dressed carefully, choosing a conservative suit that made her look older than her 23 years. Damien wore his armor of expensive tailoring. Grace stayed with the nanny, too young to witness her origin story being dissected by strangers. The courthouse was a zoo. Reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers crowded the steps. Signs reading Virgin Mother and Modern Mary competed with Homewrecker and Gold Digger. "Don't look at them," Damien said, guiding Ruby through the crowd. "Hard not to when they're screaming my name." "They're not screaming at you. They're screaming at their idea of you. Is there a difference?" "All the difference in the world." Inside the courtroom, Vivian sat with her legal team, looking every inch the wronged wife. She dressed strategically, designer but not too flashy, makeup that suggested sleepless nights, a tissue clutched in her manicured hand. "She's good," Ruby whispered. "She's practiced." "There's a difference." The judge, an elderly woman who looked like she'd seen everything and was surprised by nothing, called the court to order. "This is certainly an unusual case," she began, understatement of the century. "We have a legally married couple, where one spouse was presumed dead, a child conceived through IVF error with a third party who has never had sexual relations with anyone, and now a custody dispute. I've been practicing law for 40 years, and this is a first." Vivian's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client's position is simple. At the time of conception, she was legally married to Mr. Sterling. Any child conceived during the marriage, regardless of circumstances, has rights to both parties in the marriage." "Even if one party was presumed dead?" the judge asked. "Presumed is not actual. My client was very much alive, and in hiding, having faked her death, having escaped an abusive marriage." "Objection," Damien's lawyer said. "There's no evidence of abuse. Emotional abuse leaves no bruises, Your Honor." The judge looked tired already. "Let's stick to facts. Mrs. Sterling, you faked your death 3 years ago." Vivian stood. "I left an unhappy marriage, Your Honor. The plane crash was a coincidence I took advantage of. Why didn't you simply divorce? Have you tried divorcing a billionaire? It's easier to be dead." A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. "And now you want custody of a child you have no biological connection to? I want what's fair. This child was conceived while I was married to her father. I have rights." "Ms. Connolly," the judge turned to Ruby. "You're the biological mother?" Ruby stood on shaky legs. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you were indeed a virgin when you conceived?" "Yes." "Can you explain how that's possible?" So Ruby explained, again, the whole impossible story. The egg donation, the clinic error, the pregnancy she never chose but couldn't terminate. The judge listened without expression. "And your relationship with Mr. Sterling now?" Ruby looked at Damien. "What were they?" "Not married, not even officially together. Just two people raising a child they'd created by accident. We're Grace's parents," she said finally. "Everything else is complicated." "Life usually is," the judge said. "Mr. Sterling, what's your position in all this?" Damien stood. "My position is that my daughter belongs with her biological parents. Vivian has no claim to her. She has a claim to you, and by extension, to anything acquired during your marriage. A child is not an acquisition. No, but parental rights can be shared. Not with someone who faked their death and abandoned their marriage." "I didn't abandon it," Vivian interjected. "I escaped it." "Same thing, is it? Would you say Ruby abandoned her virginity, or escaped it through circumstances beyond her control?" The comparison was absurd, but somehow effective. The judge looked increasingly frustrated. "Here's what I see," the judge said. 3 adults fighting over a child who deserves better than to be a pawn in your drama. Mrs. Sterling, your claim is tenuous at best. You faked your death, which most courts would consider abandonment. Ms. Connolly and Mr. Sterling are the biological parents. However, the circumstances of conception and your legal marriage do complicate things." "Your Honor," Ruby said suddenly. "May I say something?" "You have the floor." Ruby took a breath. Everyone in this room is focused on rights and claims, and who deserves what. But nobody's talking about Grace. She's 3 months old. She knows my voice, my smell, my heartbeat. She's just starting to recognize Damien. Mr. Sterling. She smiles when she sees him now. Real smiles, not just gas. She's building connections, forming attachments. To remove her from the only parents she's known would be cruel, regardless of anyone's legal rights. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Vivian doesn't actually want Grace. She wants money. So let's stop pretending this is about custody and admit what it's really about. She's using my daughter as leverage for a bigger divorce settlement. That's not, Vivian started, isn't it? When did you decide you wanted custody? After you found out Damien was willing to pay $50 million for a divorce. You doubled your price and added custody threats. This isn't about Grace. It's about greed. You don't know anything about me. I know you left a man you claimed to love because he was emotionally unavailable. But instead of fighting for your marriage or filing for divorce, you faked your death. That's not the action of someone who fights for relationships. That's the action of someone who runs when things get hard. Like you ran from ever having a real relationship by staying a virgin. The courtroom gasped. Ruby felt the hit, but didn't flinch. Maybe, but I'm not running now. I'm here, fighting for my daughter, facing public humiliation and private judgment. Because that's what mothers do. They stay and fight, even when running would be easier. The judge held up a hand for silence. I've heard enough. Mrs. Sterling, your claim for custody is denied. You abandoned your marriage through fraud. Faking one's death certainly qualifies. You have no biological connection to the child and no relationship with her. However, the matter of your marriage to Mr. Sterling and any financial settlements is a separate issue to be resolved in divorce court. Your Honor, Vivian's lawyer started. My decision on custody is final. The child remains with her biological parents. Ruby nearly collapsed with relief. Damien reached for her hand, and she took it, not caring who saw or what they thought. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had tripled. The verdict had already leaked, and opinions were being shouted from all sides. No comment, Damien said repeatedly, pushing through the crowd. But Vivian stopped on the courthouse steps, turning to the cameras with practiced precision. I want everyone to know the truth, she announced. Damien Sterling is a man incapable of love. He drove me to fake my death rather than spend another day in a loveless marriage. And now he's trapped another woman, an innocent virgin, in his web. Ruby Connolly, if you're listening, run. Run before he destroys you like he destroyed me. That's not true, Ruby said, surprising herself by speaking up. The cameras swung to her. Ruby, don't, Damien warned. But she was tired of being silent, tired of letting others control the narrative. Damien Sterling is not perfect, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. He's emotionally constipated, workaholic, and sometimes thoughtless. But he's also kind, trying to change, and loves our daughter more than anything. He didn't trap me. If anything, we trapped each other through the most ridiculous series of events ever. I got pregnant while still a virgin, with a man I'd never met, through a medical mistake. If that's not proof that the universe has a sense of humor, I don't know what is. Do you love him? Someone shouted. Ruby looked at Damien, who was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Love is complicated when you do everything backwards. We had a baby, then met, then dated, then found out he was married to a woman who faked her death. So do I love him? I love who he's becoming. I love how he looks at our daughter. I love that he's trying to be better than he was. Is that enough? I don't know. But it's what we have. What about being a virgin? Another reporter called out. What about it? Yes, I've never had sex. Yes, I have a baby. Yes, it's weird. But you know what? My virginity or lack thereof doesn't define me. Being Grace's mother does. Being someone who stands up for truth does. The rest is just noise. She turned to go, but Vivian called out. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll take everything in the divorce. Take it, Damien said, surprising everyone. Take the money, the properties, whatever you want. But leave us alone. Leave Grace alone. Let us try to build something from this chaos. You're willing to give up everything? I'm willing to give up everything that doesn't matter to keep everything that does. Vivian stared at him, perhaps seeing him clearly for the first time. You've changed. People do that sometimes. Not in my experience. Then you need better experiences. They left Vivian on the courthouse steps, surrounded by cameras and questions, playing the wronged wife to an eager audience. But Ruby didn't care anymore. She had Grace, she had the truth, and maybe, possibly, she had Damien. The ride home was silent until Damien suddenly pulled over. What are you doing? Ruby asked. I need to say something, and I can't say it while driving. Okay, I love you. The words hung in the air like suspended gravity. What? I love you. Not the idea of you. Not the mother of my child, you, but you. Ruby Connolly, virgin librarian who judges my spending and calls me on my bullshit and somehow got pregnant with my child without ever kissing me first. I love you, Damien. I know we agreed not to fall in love. I know this is complicated and messy and probably doomed. But I love you anyway. And I needed to say it out loud, in daylight, with no lawyers or judges or ex-wives around. Just us. Just us and the traffic on Lakeshore Drive. Ruby, I love you too. Really, really. Despite everything. Because of everything. I love you. He kissed her then. Really kissed her. Not the careful kisses they'd shared before, but something deeper, hungrier, more real. We're still doing everything backwards, Ruby said when they broke apart. I think that's our thing now. Our thing. Yeah. Other couples do dinner and a movie. We do accidental pregnancy and resurrection. That should be on a greeting card. Worst greeting card ever. They drove home to find Grace with the nanny, wide awake and babbling at a toy rabbit with the kind of intensity that suggested serious conversation. She's discussing philosophy with the bunny, the nanny explained. Very deep thoughts about milk and naps. The important topics, Damien agreed, taking Grace and lifting her high, making her giggle. Ruby watched them, father and daughter, and felt her heart expand to accommodate this impossible love. Because that's what it was, impossible and improbable and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. That night, after Grace was asleep, they sat on the penthouse terrace looking out at the Chicago skyline. Vivian's lawyer called, Damien said. She'll take $75 million and disappear. That's a lot of money. It's worth it to be free. Will you have anything left? About $200 million. We won't starve. That's still insane wealth. Is it? I hadn't noticed. Liar. Okay, it's comfortable wealth. Enough to give Grace everything she needs and most of what she wants. What about what you want? I have what I want. You, Grace, this weird little family we've built. We're not a family, remember? You said so yourself. I was wrong. We're definitely a family. The strangest family in Chicago, possibly the world, but a family. So what happens now? Now we do the one thing we haven't done yet. What's that? Have sex. Ruby choked on her wine. What? You're a 23-year-old virgin with a 3-month-old baby. That has to be some kind of record. It's not a race. No, but it's also not natural. Unless you're planning to stay a virgin forever. I hadn't really thought about it. Liar. Okay, I've thought about it. A lot. Especially when you kiss me and I feel like my entire body is on fire. Good to know I have that effect. Don't get cocky. Too late. Damien, I'm scared. Of sex. Of changing what we have. Everything is good right now. Weird but good. What if sex changes that? It will change it. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. Change isn't bad, Ruby. Sometimes change is just evolution. Evolution of what? Of us. Of this. Of whatever we're becoming. What are we becoming? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. He stood, offering her his hand. Come to bed with me. That's not very romantic. Would you prefer I sweep you off your feet and carry you? Maybe. So he did, lifting her like she weighed nothing, carrying her through the penthouse to his bedroom while she laughed and protested and secretly loved every second. This is very caveman of you. You bring out my primitive side. I bring out your weird side. That too. He set her down gently beside the bed, and suddenly the playfulness evaporated, replaced by something electric and serious. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for, he said. I'm ready. I think. Maybe. God, how do people do this naturally? Usually with less talking. I talk when I'm nervous. I noticed. Are you nervous? Terrified. Why? You've done this before. Not with you. Not with someone who matters this much. I matter. Ruby, you and Grace are the only things that matter. That's a lot of pressure for a virgin. No pressure. We can stop anytime. What if I don't want to stop? Then we don't stop. What if I'm bad at it? Impossible. You don't know that. I know you. Everything you do with complete commitment. This won't be different. He was right. When Ruby finally stopped thinking and let herself feel, she committed completely. And what followed was awkward and perfect and strange and wonderful, like everything else in their backwards relationship. So, she said afterward, lying in his arms, I'm not a virgin anymore. How does it feel? Like I did things in the wrong order, but ended up in the right place. That's very philosophical for someone who just had sex for the first time. I'm a librarian. We're always philosophical. I love you. I love you too. Marry me. Ruby sat up so fast she got dizzy. What? Marry me. Once the divorce is final. Make this official. Damien, we've known each other 6 months. And we have a child together. That's not a reason to get married. No, but love is. Is it? Because you loved Vivian, and look how that turned out. I never loved Vivian. I love the idea of her. I love the reality of you. The reality of me is messy and complicated and currently covered in things I won't mention. The reality of you is perfect. I'm not perfect. Perfect for me, then. That's cheesy. That's true. Ask me again in a year. Why a year? Because in a year, Grace will be walking and talking. Your divorce will be final. We'll know if this is real or just trauma bonding. This is real. Then it'll still be real in a year. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Fine. But I'm asking again in exactly 1 year. Deal. Ruby. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For being you. For keeping Grace. For fighting Vivian. For giving me a chance to be better than I was. You're welcome. Now go to sleep. Grace will be up in 2 hours, and it's your turn to feed her. How is it my turn? You're breastfeeding. I pump. You can give her a bottle. That seems unfair, says the man who didn't have to push a human out of his body. Valid point. They fell asleep tangled together, two people who'd done everything wrong and somehow ended up right. The year that followed was a blur of firsts. Grace's first word, no, because of course it was. Her first steps, toward Ruby while Damien filmed and cried. Her first birthday, a party that cost more than most weddings but was worth it for the cake face photos. Vivian took her $75 million and disappeared to Europe, occasionally sending postcards that said things like, spending your money in Monaco, and thanks for the yacht. Damien found them amusing. Ruby found them sad. She's alone, Ruby said, looking at a postcard from Greece. By choice. Still alone. Do you feel sorry for her? A little. She had you and threw you away. She didn't have me. She had a version of me that doesn't exist anymore. Because of Grace? Because of you. Both of you. You two made me want to be someone worth loving. You were always worth loving. You just needed to believe it. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. Damien took Ruby and Grace to the beach to celebrate, where Grace ate sand and Ruby built castles and Damien forgot to check his phone for 3 whole hours. You're free, Ruby said, watching the sun set. I've been free since the day Grace was born. That's sweet but legally inaccurate. I'm trying to be romantic. Try harder. So he did. He got down on one knee, right there in the sand, pulling out a ring he'd been carrying for weeks. It hasn't been a year, Ruby pointed out. It's been 11 months and 23 days. Close enough. Close enough. Ruby Connolly, mother of my child, keeper of my sanity, only woman to get pregnant while still a virgin. Will you marry me? That's how you're proposing? By listing my resume. Would you prefer poetry? I'd prefer honesty. Honestly, I can't imagine a life without you and Grace. I don't want to imagine it. You've turned my ordered, controlled existence into beautiful chaos, and I love every second of it. Marry me, not because we have a child together, not because it makes sense, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible. That's better. So, yes. Really, but I have conditions. Of course you do. Small wedding. No media. And we tell Grace the truth about how she was conceived when she's old enough to understand. The virgin birth story. The whole story. The accident. The backwards dating. Vivian. All of it. That's going to be an interesting conversation. Our whole life is an interesting conversation. He slipped the ring on her finger, and Grace chose that moment to throw sand at both of them, laughing hysterically. She has perfect timing, Damien said, spitting out sand. She's our daughter. Of course she does. They were married 2 months later in the archive where they'd first really met, surrounded by ancient books and the few people who mattered. Ruby wore a simple dress she'd bought off the rack. Damien wore a suit but skipped the tie. Grace wore a tiny tuxedo onesie and screamed through the entire ceremony. Do you take this man? The officiant asked, raising his voice over Grace's protests. I do, despite the screaming. Do you take this woman? I do, because of the screaming. I now pronounce you husband and wife and parents of a very loud baby. They kissed while Grace continued her baby rage, and it was perfect in its imperfection. We did everything backwards, Ruby said at the reception, which was really just dinner with 20 people. Except this, Damien replied. We did this exactly right. Eventually. Eventually is better than never. Is that our motto now? Our motto is at least it's interesting. That should be on our Christmas cards. We're not Christmas card people. We could be. Ruby, we're the virgin birth couple. We're never going to be normal Christmas card people. He was right. They weren't normal anything people. They were the couple who'd done everything backwards and somehow made it work. The billionaire who'd learned to love and the virgin who'd learned to trust. The parents of a miracle baby who was really just a medical mistake that became the best thing that ever happened to them. 5 years later, when Grace was old enough to ask why she didn't have brothers or sisters, Ruby and Damien had to explain that her conception was so complicated, they were afraid to try again. But I'm lonely, Grace complained. You have us, Damien pointed out. Your parents. That doesn't count. So they adopted. Twin boys from the same clinic where the mistake had been made. Babies whose intended parents had backed out last minute. It's poetic, Ruby said, holding one baby while Damien held the other. It's insane. That too. But mostly poetic. What are we going to tell people? The truth. That we're collecting children with complicated origin stories. We're going to need a bigger place. Where you could work less, and we could make do with what we have. I barely work now. You work 40 hours a week. That's barely working. For a billionaire. Multi-millionaire. The divorce, remember? Still rich enough to afford 3 kids. What if they ask about their story? How they came to be? We tell them the truth. That families are made in all sorts of ways. Sometimes through birth, sometimes through adoption, sometimes through medical accidents that shouldn't be possible, but are. You're very wise for someone who was a virgin until 24. Virginity has nothing to do with wisdom. No, but inexperience usually does. I was inexperienced in sex, not life. And now I'm experienced in both and exhausted by everything. Regrets? Never. You. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. If you'd met me sooner, none of this would have happened. I'd have been too young. You'd have been married to Vivian. Fate has terrible timing. Or perfect timing, depending on how you look at it. They looked at it as perfect, even when it wasn't. Even when Grace announced at school that her mom was a virgin when she was born and started a parent-teacher conference that required documentation. Even when the twins turned out to be just as loud as Grace had been as a baby. Even when Vivian sent a wedding gift, a book on marriage, with a note that said, "Good luck, you'll need it." She's not wrong, Ruby said, reading the note. About needing luck? About marriage being hard. Everything worth doing is hard. That's what you said about sex the first time. I was right then too. Cocky. Confident. Same thing with you. You love it. I love you. Still? After all this. Because of all this. The chaos. The backwards everything. The impossible made possible. We should write a book. Who would believe it? No one. That's what would make it perfect. They never wrote the book, but they lived it. Every strange, wonderful, backwards moment of it. The virgin who got pregnant without sex. The billionaire who learned to love. The baby who shouldn't have existed, but did. The family that was built on accidents and held together by choice. And if you're wondering how a story this insane could be true, well, that's the thing about truth. It's always stranger than fiction. Fiction has to make sense. Truth just has to happen. And this happened. Comment below if you've ever had your life turned upside down by impossible circumstances that became the best thing that ever happened to you. Because that's what this was. Impossible becoming inevitable. Accident becoming destiny. Backwards becoming the only way forward. 10 years after that first meeting in the archive, Ruby stood in the same spot where she'd shown Damien the illuminated manuscripts, holding their youngest, another adoption, a girl this time, while Damien helped Grace with a school project about family histories. So Mom was really a virgin when she had me? Grace asked, old enough now to understand the biological impossibility. Really, Damien confirmed. And you were married to someone else? Who had faked her death? Yes. Our family is weird. The weirdest. I like it. Yeah. Normal is boring. We're interesting. That we are. Ruby smiled, listening to them. They were interesting. Impossibly, improbably, wonderfully interesting. Mom, Grace called out. Tell me again about the first time you met Dad. Which time? The auction, or when we found out he was your biological father? Both. Tell me all of it. So Ruby did. She told the whole story, start to finish, backwards to forwards, impossible to inevitable. And Grace listened with the same wonder she'd had the first time, and the 10th time, and would have the 100th time. Because some stories never get old. Some stories, especially the true ones, especially the impossible ones, get better with every telling. And this story was just beginning. Mom, Grace asked when Ruby finished, do you think I'll have a weird love story too? I hope not, Damien said quickly. I hope so, Ruby countered. Weird love stories are the best kind. Even when they're complicated, especially then. The best things in life are complicated. Like us. Exactly like us. And that, really, was the truth of it. They were complicated and strange and absolutely perfect in their imperfection. A family built on the impossible, held together by love, and proof that sometimes the universe knows what it's doing even when it seems like it's lost its mind. The virgin birth might have been the beginning, but it was far from the most miraculous thing about their story. The real miracle was everything that came after. The choosing, the staying, the building of something beautiful from the chaos of accident. That was the real miracle. That was the love story. That was their truth, stranger than fiction and better than perfect. And it was theirs, forever and backwards.